Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in this world. I hope you are all well and safe. And I am excited to welcome you all to the this conference or this summit to discuss about wellness and well-being. So this employee wellness and well-being global summit. I am really excited with the conversations that we are going to have during this week. So this summit will be from today through Thursday, every day, starting at this same time. We're going to have 4 panels per day, covering a lot of ground about all things wellness and well-being. And the hope with these conversations is sort of twofold. Number one is to hear and learn from the amazing panel of experts that we are bringing to this conversation. So I am really hoping that we get to hear and learn from their stories, their insights, their experiences, their ideas, and their suggestions for all of us. And the second thing that I'm hoping we do not only with this event but after the event is that we can somehow start getting into action. We have there are so many things that we talk a lot about, and I think by now we are pretty aware of so many things. Diversity, equity, inclusion, wellness, and well-being, and many other areas. And I think that what we're lacking is just moving on these conversations from awareness to action. And what I'm hoping is that as you get ideas and you listen to stories and you connect with other people in this conversation, I am hoping that you not only get inspired, but also you at the same time you are uh, ready to take action to build better wellness and well-being, specifically in your organization. So we're gonna have an amazing conversation today. We were supposed to be broadcasting this in the Hacking HR Lab and on LinkedIn Live. LinkedIn Live, we're only broadcasting on LinkedIn Live. So if any of you was in the Hacking HR Lab, we're having a little bit of some technical issues over there. So I am sorry about that. It happens, out of our control. So fortunately, we can broadcast here on LinkedIn Live. So before welcoming our panel, I want to once again reiterate to you that this conversation will be 3 days, and every day we are covering 4 topics. So today we're kicking off. This is day number one. We're kicking off this first panel. Is going to be getting real wellness and well-being truly matter. So how do we operationalize them at work? Then from there, we're going to move on to the second panel, which is going to be connecting the dots between corporate culture, wellness, well-being, and mental health. Then the third panel of the day will be about building resilience, helping people navigate the challenges of this very chaotic world we are living in right now. And the last panel of today will be about architecting corporate culture for wellness, well-being, and mental health. So let me start welcoming our first panel. Tope, Mindy, Mary, Wagner. Hello, everybody.
Mhm.
Welcome. We are missing Dave. He was here before. I don't see him seeing anymore. Hopefully, he's going to be able to connect in a second. But hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited to welcome you all to this panel. Oh, there's Dave. Um, I don't know, Dave, you can. I'm gonna bring you on board. I know it's loading up in there. So once again, thank you everybody for being part of this conversation. I am excited to welcome you all. I'm gonna ask you that if you are not speaking, you keep your microphones muted just in case to avoid as much as possible any background noise. And we are in this conversation, this first panel, getting real. Wellness and well-being truly matter, so the question becomes how we operationalize them at work. So I'm going to use my signature kickoff for every panel that I moderate. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves together with responding to one question. Wellness and well-being. What does that mean to you? When we talk about wellness and well-being, specifically, at work, in the workplace, what comes to your mind? What does that mean? How does that look like at work? So if you can respond to that question together with introducing yourselves, I think we are going to be off to a fantastic start. So I think Dave is having some technical issues, but let's kick this off. So who wants to kick this panel off? Who wants to set us in motion here? Anybody?
I'll go first, Enrique.
Mary, go ahead. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much. So glad to be here. Mary Garcia, and I am the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Haggerty. And when I think about wellness and well-being, I really think about, what is the satisfaction, the mental and physical, the strength, the balance, and also the emotional connection that exists between employees and their companies, right? And so we know that is so important as we continue to work in this new hybrid work environment, but it also equates to if our employees are healthy, then we have a healthy business. And that way we can really thrive in a different way. And I think we're having to think about how we invest in the well being differently than what we've had to before.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, thank you so much for sharing that and welcome to the panel. I think we're going to have a great conversation in that direction. Wagner, do you want to go next?
Sure, there's so much to be talked about. But hi, everyone. I'm the head of capabilities for Future of Work at Prudential. And I started my career as a psychotherapist, as a clinical social worker. I was an employee assistance program for a counselor for almost 6 years. And I come from a clinical background. So to me, wellness, mental health means the difference between having a positive life and having a life of challenges with anxiety, stress, and things that you cannot handle, because it is part of life to have these trauma experiences. So I think the first thing we need to do is to allow ourselves to have the experience of these feelings. Then we have to allow for people to exhibit and manifest those behaviors. And then at work, I keep thinking about this. It's challenging flow, because you want to challenge people to be better at what they want to be better at. And then the flow of giving them an opportunity to have a positive experience. So I have some ideas, but I leave you with that. But to me, it means a positive life as opposed to a very difficult one.
Absolutely, Wagner. Thank you so much for being here. And by the way, you have been in so many of our panels, and it is only today that I think I realized or learned that you worked, in that field before. So, so good to know. We learned a little bit of everybody, every day. So thank you so much for being here. Tope, please go ahead if you want to introduce yourself and just respond to this question of what wellness and well-being means to you. What does it look like in the workplace?
Hi everyone, nice to be here. Again, being part of another Akin HR panel is cool. Whilst trying to battle the elephant, there is the internet, there is the Wi-Fi connectivity. So bear with me. So my name is Tammy. I am currently the VP of Talent Management at MyAgro. And when I think about wellness and well-being, I'm pretty much going to be combining what Mary has said and what Wagner has said. So not just looking at how, as an organization, you're providing the right environment for an employee to thrive, but also from the personal, which is where the clinical aspect comes in for me, because sometimes the home environment and how that person fares within those boxes of family, romance, finance, and stability, as it deals personally with them, oftentimes impacts the workplace and their work and how they do. So somebody might be in the office looking great, looking awesome, but from the home front, things are bad. And one way or the other, this sips into their work productivity. So for me, it's holistic in terms of the human being as themselves. When I think about wellness, when I think about well-being, how they doing, and then how does it then impact the various aspects where then that is work, where work comes in.
Absolutely, Tammy. And we're gonna be discussing about all those elements, specifically around all things holistic when it comes to wellness and well-being. And actually, we're gonna be covering some panels discussing not just the uh, wellness and well-being as in just mental health, for example, which is has taken over as one of the main sort of identifiers of wellness and well-being in the workplace, but also financial wellness and physical wellness, emotional wellness through the conversations that we are going to have today. So thank you so much and welcome to the panel. And Mindy, hello.
Hi, Mindy Hankoop. I'm a Chief People Officer in Transition. And when I think of wellness and well being, I'm really thinking about that workplace ecosystem, which allows our whole human selves, our mind, body, and souls to be able to thrive and be able to operate at our optimum and be able to realize things that we wouldn't have without the support of that workplace ecosystem and be able to work with others in a healthy and thriving way.
Absolutely. Love that. Mindy, thank you so much. Well, once again, everybody, thank you so much for being here, part of this conversation. I am very excited about what we're going to be discussing throughout this entire event, and specifically today and this first panel kicking off this series. Before moving on to having our conversation, I want to once again acknowledge our audience. Thank you so much for being here. I see a lot of you connecting here. So you have been telling us where you're connecting from. So thank you so much for doing that. Please, if you are just joining now, please let us know where in the world you are. We would love to know where everybody's connecting from. I just for the sake of our panel, I'm gonna tell them a little bit of where everybody's connecting from. We have people from Pakistan, from New York, from Hungary, from Taiwan, from Oman, from LA, Kenya, DC. I was in DC a couple of days ago. India, New Jersey, Poland, Canada, Nigeria. Let me see, South Africa, Brooklyn, Paris, France, Hungary, more South Africa. Let me see, Turkey, Indonesia, Germany, Austria, MK. I don't know what MK is, but sounds like someplace fun. So let me see, Dubai. Well, thank you, London, UK. So please let us know where you're connecting from. This is a very global audience, so I am excited to have you all in here. If you have any questions, there are two ways that we can manage those questions. One, if we have the opportunity, I'm going to bring your questions to the panel. But if not, either way, ask the question in the chat. Make sure that you are commenting on what other people are saying, because this is an opportunity not only to learn from these four amazing panelists, but at the same time to learn from each other and to connect with each other. So please make sure that you are asking your questions, commenting, and saying, well, all the insights and the ideas that you may have in mind. So let's kick this off. Wellness and Wellbeing Global Summit. We're talking about getting real. So let me start by asking you this question. How do we actually get real in the workplace talking about wellness and well-being? And I ask you this question because it sounds so basic, but still there are so many barriers in the workplace to be authentically oneself. And what that means is that we still, even if we say something, the practices in our workplaces prevent people from coming out of their challenges, coming out of the mental health, say, issues that they are dealing with, because they are afraid of the consequences of what happens if they actually speak out about what is happening to them. So getting real, how do we actually move this conversation forward in the workplace? And if you can, I want to make sure that throughout the entire event, but specifically in this conversation, we get very practical and tactical here. So any tips that you can share with the audience for them to say, I'm going to do that right now in my workplace, that would be fantastic. So going back to my question, getting real, how do we humanize, how do we begin this conversation of wellness and well-being in the workplace and tear down all of those barriers that have prevented these conversations from actually happening? Anybody who wants to kick us off here?
I can go. I can kick you off.
Oh, Chopez, yeah, go ahead, please.
I think okay. I think one of those barriers, and which could also serve as a sort of an obvious solution as well, is culture. In the course of my experience, I think is very, very important when setting up like an employee assistance program, especially when it comes to well-being and mental care or personal issues or challenges, like you mentioned, if you need to understand and make sure that you integrate the culture of the different locations for which your company is operating into that program. A typical example was when we were trying to, at one of my places of work, we were trying to sign up an EAP partner on a program. And basically, all of the therapists, all of the counselors that they had were pretty much very, very foreign to most of the practices
Mm.
in Africa. And in Africa, generally, you're not going to find somebody who is going to come up to you and tell you what they're experiencing, whether it's in the workplace or even at home. It's just a cultural thing. Nobody wants to share that. You're being brought
Mm.
up like, okay, I'm having issues with my husband, don't say it out there. I'm having issues with my dad, don't say it out there. And I want to use a practical example of a very renowned person, for example, in Nigeria, that just died. And she died because she got beaten to death. I mean, the assumption, well, right now it's still a case, is that she got beaten to death by her husband.
Wow.
But meanwhile, when you see this lady out there, she's all smiles, everybody loves her. Pretty much nobody was knowing what she was going through. So again, is that if you're setting up a program in place, is that program efficient enough that it takes into consideration not just the topic of mental health or well-being, but takes into cognizance the culture of the people for which are going to be signed up in that program, so that it's either I'm having somebody who is an indigene as a therapist or a psychologist on that program, because that person, it's easier for them to be able to talk to this individual because they already know it's difficult for them to talk about it, and to be able to find different ways to talk about. So I think for me, because there's so many things that we can think about, and the panel will discuss it, but I think it was just very important for me to highlight that whenever you're setting up a program, whenever you're doing communications, let it not just be a topic of mental health and well-being. Let it consider the diverse attributes, culture, and norms within the country of operation, so that you can get the best out of that program or get the best out of the people. Because when you're then marketing this program or initiative in the company, they see that, yes, this speaks to me, this relates to me, this is taking this into consideration. Again, just a very silly example here was I was watching a K drama of recent, and I saw KFC there, the KFC meal. It's a Chinese Korean drama, and the KFC meal that they bought for breakfast had congee. In Africa, you're not going to find our local meal, for example, on a KFC menu. So it was very awesome to see that, because what they have done was taking that culture, what was important to those people, into that business. So just look at it from that angle, that if you want your program, if you want your speech or talk or marketing on wellness and well-being in the workplace to work, consider the culture.
Absolutely. Tope, thank you so much for sharing that. And we're going to have a couple of panels actually discussing about culture. One of them is today, and the other one will be tomorrow. But it's so important what you're saying, because we tend to uh, try to use sort of the same principles across the board, and they just don't work. I mean, our cultures, and especially in these new setups where people work remotely and our workforce is distributed, understanding the nuances and the specifics of each culture is so important to build effective wellness and well-being strategies. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Going back to the question of getting real wellness, well-being, how to make it happen in the workplace. Anybody else wants to chime in here? Mary, we go with you.
Yes, thank you. I think one of the things we need to do, and I know it's going to sound very simple, but we have to name it within our organization. I think too often we have skirted around well-being, and there's been some really great focus on wellness in the sense of physical wellness, but that well-being piece, to Timmy's point, was that we didn't really talk about it before, and when we talked about it, it looked very different. And so I think we have to name it, we have to own it. And how does that show up in your organization? And who are those stakeholders that you need to identify that are key to long-term sustainability of real well-being within your organization? And then you need to look at your workforce. What are the ways that you're measuring it? what are you doing with the data? I think data is so valuable in how we look at well-being, and then making sure that we're measuring it and then doing something with that data. How do you go across the organization to ensure that you are looking at the holistic aspect of well-being and then being strategic and thoughtful about how you make those changes? I almost think of it like a to from state. This is what well-being and wellness used to look like. This is what it looks like now. Same thing that we do with diversity, inclusion, and belonging, the future of work. It all looked very different 2 to 3 years ago. And now we're living in a whole different reality. And being able to look at those pieces, measure it, and then instill the framework within the organization, the process, procedures, policies to reflect supporting it in a long-term way.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. And it seems to me that because of the nature of this topic, it's. I'm not saying that we don't think it's important, uh, but it feels as if we are not giving it the proper framework, the proper vision, and more so understanding deeply the implications of not doing what we need to do to address wellness and well-being in the workplace. Because even though we have the science saying people who are depressed, sick, people who are physically, emotionally, mentally dealing with some challenges, they won't be that productive person that they could potentially be. And I think that because we still don't are not clicking those things together, I fear that that framework that you're talking about is still missing. Not because we don't know how to do it, it's just because I don't think that yet this has uh, become that conversation that all workplaces are having. And I am hoping that we don't wait until it is too late for this to become part of all the strategic conversations that we have at work. So, Mary, thank you so much for sharing that. Wagner, I think you wanted to share something too.
I have a lot to share because the thing is, um, these issues have been part of organizational life for many, many years. I was an employee assistance program counselor 20 years ago. And the reality is it's still the same issues. But if you want to be practical, one thing that all organizations can do is really start creating the conditions in which well-being can happen.
Yeah.
So for hybrid workplaces, for example, stop the idea of trying to force people into 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. Make sure that the whole experience is personalized. If you want to do something very practical, is stop designating what days of the week that people need to be there, how many days, and start inviting people to share what is best for them. Is a personalization of the employee experience that's missing. The second thing, give them the resources and training. I know this is the first step, but the maturity that people have right now requires you to actually share your experiences. There is nothing more powerful than having a senior leader talking about their depression. There is nothing more powerful than a senior leader talking about the difficulties they had bringing up a family by themselves. Uh, I think it's not difficult, but I think we need to start assuming the responsibility and accountability of leaders that we are. And with that comes the idea that your personal life and your professional life have to merge, and you have to have the courage to be vulnerable in front of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
No?
that is so powerful. And there's one topic that we're gonna be talking about in a second, which is psychological safety
Yeah.
for everybody in the organization. And we're gonna get to that in a second, Wagner. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Mindy, do you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has such great answers. I think just to add on to that, maybe to take a little bit further what others have said is like things that we can tactically do within the workplace is also just to help create the structure for prioritizing wellness and such things as when we are hearing from our employees that they need more time, that they're overworking. Are we, in a way, as a company, have we made it clear what the working hours are, especially with an always on culture? If we move from being in the office to now working from home, have we made it clear what those agreed upon work hours are? What are the SLAs to really help put those barriers back in place that used to exist for most likely many people's employee populations, and what does that look like, and being able to help the employees have a voice into that. And that might look different on different teams. And so how then do we work with leaders to have conversations with employees to set team norms, possibly around SLAs and working agreements, or not working on the weekends? And then maybe there's ways that we can measure those team norms, and are they actually happening? Are we tracking how many emails maybe are going outside of those hours, or messages going outside of those hours, and reporting back on those metrics and holding each other accountable to commit to the standards or the structure that we've put in place. That is not just something that we've named and put on as a poster on a wall, but something that we're actually living and breathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the element of accountability is so powerful in there. And you just mentioned some indicators that they are not really rocket science. How many emails is this organization sending outside of the normal sort of like work schedule, right, from 9 to 5 or whatever that looks like? Even basic stuff like that, or how many emails we're sending out during the weekends, and connecting those dots with how is the team that is engaging in those kinds of activities dealing with mental health challenges or wellness and well-being. Those are things that we can measure very, very easily, and we can start drawing some conclusions out of that. So thank you for bringing that up, Mindy. uh, our role in HR, uh, talking about operationalizing wellness and well-being at work, this role that we have in HR is it's very complex for many things. One, because we ourselves are dealing with a lot of these very same mental health challenges that everybody else is dealing with. It's just that it seems that we have to care for others, and that makes the entire sort of situation for us very complicated. And recently there was a research showing that 98% of all HR people are burnout, and I'm guessing that the other 2% probably didn't want to respond to that question, or maybe didn't understand the question. But I'm guessing it's closer to probably 100% than just 98%, which is still, of course, almost everybody. But this role in HR has several elements. One element, going back to what Wagner said before, is creating um, creating the opportunity for senior leaders to be vulnerable in front of everybody else. Number two, it is creating the right cultural conditions for everybody else who is not a senior leader to come forward and say, I am dealing with this. And they are doing so safely without fear of negative repercussions for them coming forward and saying, this is what I'm dealing with. At the same time, we have to set up perhaps some key indicators that allow us to understand the state of wellness and well-being in our organization. So there's a lot of things that we can do from HR. The question becomes, how do we do it? How do we make all of those things happen? How do we create the right conditions for senior leaders to be vulnerable, for everybody else to understand that there's a culture that allows them to be safe when they express what they may be dealing with. And at the same time, we are setting up some indicators to keep everybody accountable for this wellness and well-being sort of conversation and operationalization in the workplace. How do we do that? How do we make that happen? That's a big question, by the way, with a lot of stuff going on in there. And let me give you a couple of seconds to think about that. I know we got a bunch of comments from the audience. Thank you so much for being so engaged. I'm sorry that I'm trying to keep my eyes on the panel, also on the chat. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I'm gonna bring some of your questions to the panel in a second. Please keep them coming. Keep posting your comments. Keep sharing your ideas, your insights. If you have any questions or resources that you want to share with everybody that is here participating in this conversation, please feel free to post that in the chat. So going back to you, panelists, this conversation of creating a safe space for senior leaders, a safe space for everybody else, but also keeping everybody accountable with some indicators from HR. How do we make that happen? Who wants to kick us off here?
If
Tammy, go
you
ahead,
don't
please.
mind, go, okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So I mean, pretty sure everybody's going to have a lot to give on this account. I think I'm going to look for like the simplest ones. And one is, first of all, is the discussion first needs to happen, whether from an internal coach or an external coach with the leadership in terms of what it means to be vulnerable. Because again, back to the topic of be it culture, be it background, wherever you're coming from, not everybody finds it easy to come out with, okay, this is what I'm going through. So I think, first of all, having that conversation, coaching leaders on what it means to be vulnerable, the benefits of them being vulnerable, and how this impacts their team, impacts the business, the culture. First of all, would start off or kick off that cultural background that we're trying to build. Because I mean, they would have to be the ones to take that first leap for everybody else to follow. Then I think maybe another practical thing that can then be done when that topic has been embraced and is well developed at the leadership level is having very simple things like spaces on Slack. I mean, okay, for example, for companies that I've worked with that use Slack, we have channels, for instance, that are called random channels. We have channels that are called wins. We have channels that are called challenges. So even if it's not a channel, we can have something as simple as a hashtag, like maybe a hashtag well-being. And then maybe a leader for that week states, okay, what well-being challenge they experienced that week and what they're done to manage that. And then leaders take turns, maybe week on week, to using that same hashtag to write a little bit of story in terms of what challenge they felt from a well-being point of view, how that impacted the work and how they turned that around, and then start getting people. I mean, when they start to see leaders being vulnerable publicly with this within the workspace, then we can start to encourage people from Kaizen meetings to then also come into such channels to then start to use such hashtag, because we use it for wins anyways. We say, what was your win this week? You hashtag and do that. So if we can do that for wins and do that for the positives, out of these negatives, when they're shared, positives can also alight, because somebody might be going through the same thing or whatever it is that you did to turn that around. The other individual can use that to turn it around. So, I mean, simple things like that will be practical. But of course, the first thing is even touching on the topic of vulnerability with the leadership to understand how beneficial this will be to them and their teams and the organization, then take that, cascade that same topic downwards until everybody grasps the idea behind why they're doing that, and then have little initiatives like the hashtag.
Thank you, Jamie. One thing that I want to highlight from what you're saying is that even though this is a complex issue and it's a complex conversation, there are solutions that are complex by nature, and there are things that are so simple to do. And I think that so often we get caught up with the complexity of complex solutions that we forget that there are many simple things that we can start doing to move this conversation forward and to solve, even if it's one problem for one person. That's better than not doing it at all and focusing on the complex stuff, and that probably will take more time, more resources, more energy, and whatnot. So thank you for bringing the two ends of the spectrum, the one side of solutions that are more complex, but also the simplicity of things that we can start making happen like right now. So anybody else? Mindy, go ahead, please. And then Mary.
Yeah. When I get this question, it often is interesting to go back with leaders and look at the original like company values. So often if we want to be rewarding and recognizing and setting expectations within the workplace around well-being and vulnerability, do our values actually tie back to that? Because the values really, if they're done really well, should really set the standard for what is the expected behavior, how do we prioritize our decision making, how do we interact with each other each day, and what does success look like that for me, and all the way down to what level I am within the company to live these values and interact with people within these values. And if they speak to human-centered vulnerability, and then we get really clear on what does that look like, how does that show up when it's done successfully, also when it isn't done well, and what do we do when it's not done well? And then we can start to hold each other accountable once they get crystal clear on what those are and what the behavior looks like and what am I responsible for showing up to work in this culture successfully. Then we can start to reward and recognize when we see great vulnerability. We start to talk about it because it's a part of who we are and what we do and how we work together. It's just making sure that we go back and really rethink those values, and are they actually clear, and do people understand what does that look like when it's successfully done every day, and that our leaders and employees know about how to have a conversation that when it is messed up, how do we clean it up together?
Thank you, Mindy. One question that I'm going to ask you after this round, which I want for all of you to keep in the brain up there for when we ask it, is that there are still a lot of organizations where all of this sounds like, oh yeah, that's cool, but it's fluffy, and we gotta make money here. This organization is, if we don't make the money, I mean, we can talk about this forever, but we don't know if the organization will be here forever. So the question will be how to move this from being just fluffy to being part of the business strategy, a business imperative, something that we can either translate into, if we do it, this is how much money we're going to save, or how much more money we're going to make, or if we don't do it, this is how much money we're going to lose by letting talent go or whatnot. So we're going to get back to that, but I just connected to what you were saying, Mindy, of humanizing the workplace, but making sure that from a business standpoint, it makes sense for those who only talk business and not necessarily human. Mary, I know you wanted to add something to the previous question. I hope I didn't get you all confused.
No, but now I have like so much more to think about and to share. Okay, first I will address the original question. I think too often when we talk about creating psychological safety, we might be going into this with assumed assumptions about what that safe space looks like. And I think as we are leading teams or working across teams, we really need to ask our team members, our employees, what does a safe space, what does that look like for you? What are those conditions? I think we are assuming a lot there. And so I think one, it's important to ask that question within the teams that you're working with or that you're leading. And then how do you develop meaningful conversations into some of your weekly team meetings? It might look differently every week, but I think you've got to start emulating that as a leader to show that, we can talk about these things. And then with that is adding that level. I think someone talked about vulnerability. Maybe you're having a tough time. Maybe you've got a teenager that is just really, trying out some new things, and maybe you're not having the best day. You might not have to share all of that, but showing that vulnerability, right? And the other thing that I think that is not utilized enough is I hear a lot just from, across corporate America. So many employees are sharing that their leaders are canceling or postponing the one-on-one meetings. That is such a critical time to really check in with those employees that you're leading and really see what's going on, see what they're excited about, ask them what are some of those barriers that you can remove, and just say, hey, are you okay? Those are such simple little things, but that starts to create this culture of wellness and well-being and starts to make it okay with talking about it. And to your point, Enrique, we've got to monetize all of this. I think about it just like diversity work. Diversity, we know what we need to do there, but we have to show the monetization of the impact. What is the risk if we don't do anything else? Well-being and wellness, same thing. What is the risk if we continue to do nothing? What impact is that going to have to the organization? And then how are we not going to be able to ramp up and be successful in the future if our employees aren't healthy? We've got to monetize it. And that goes back to some of the data.
Absolutely. And the positive side of all the, how complex this conversation is, that one positive side is that we have the data now to show all of these things, to show like, hey, most people that are leaving right now, they are not leaving for your organization for money. They are leaving it for flexibility, for respect, for dignity as a human, as a human that comes before being an employee. So if your turnover, 70% of your turnover is because people are not being respected at work, you're losing millions of dollars a year just by not addressing something that is complex, but you can start easy with respect, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and whatnot. So we have the science now to say it's not fluffy anymore. It is a business, imperative to address this because it costs us money if we don't do it. Mary, thank you for sharing that. Wagner, do you want to share something? I'm
Yeah,
sure
let
you
me
do.
share. There is this experience that I had at IBM. I was the head of leadership in management development. We realized that the best bet that we could make is enhancing the manager experience. So we had 37,000 managers worldwide. And what we did was experiential learning based on human centered design, design thinking, and inclusive design. And instead of training managers on how to do performance management, talent identification, high potential identification, all the processes, we let go of all of that and we focus on 6 moments of impact, those that have the greatest impact on the employee manager relationship. They include failures, dealing with failures, first day in a meeting, first day at work, feedback, dealing with the personal crisis, all of those things in real time experiential learning where managers had the opportunity to test it out how they respond to those things. We increased engagement for those managers by 11 points.
Wow.
We decreased attrition by 5 points, and we went further. Medallia helped us. The managers that participated in the experience had 13% more likelihood to attain their business targets. So, obviously, there is a business case for all this. But we need to start with management development. In management development, HR has to stop the pre assumptions that performance management is going to solve everything, that the
Mhm.
talent management is going to solve everything. Process over people never works. We are in an agile world. And the other one I would say is bet on connections over content, because throwing training at people is not doing anything. We know
Yeah.
this for 20 years of diversity, and we are not very successful, are we? So let's not focus on content. Let's focus on connection. So HR needs to now introduce behavioral health and behavioral psychology into their development. They have to start being comfortable with the idea that we need to evolve our profession as well. So with that, I think we can do it. And Prudential gave 2 days of mental health now for people to choose. Prudential also started all the pandemic broadcasts by our CEO by talking about well-being and how they're doing. So it wasn't a business oriented discussion. So you have to manifest in everything you do that you are prioritizing well-being. And that's simple to do, but you need to be conscientious.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the how critical leaders in the organization, and particularly the frontline leaders, the immediate leaders, are in this conversation, because very often they are the ones setting up the stage for the right or the wrong culture. It's just interesting that we so often we talk about culture as something, like without a shape, like an amoeba, and all, is strange. But the reality is that that culture is both role modeled, it is shaped, it is exemplified, it is just lived and breathed by the work that these leaders are doing, the front managers in the organization. And they, HR or a CEO can say, we have the best culture in the world, but if your frontline manager is creating conditions of disrespect and abuse in the workplace, then you have nothing. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you talk about what the organizational culture looks like if you're not living it at that one level, which is your closer immediate leadership level. uh, I know we have a lot of questions from the audience, so I'm going to use the next 10-15 minutes to try to bring as many of them in, so some sort of a lightning rounds here, for anybody who wants to jump in and say something. Somebody asked here, I think this is very important, a conversation about addictions in the workplace, managing or addressing addictions to substance or negative behaviors or whatnot. Any insights on how to address addictions by employees in the workplace? Anything that you want to share with us? I think this one is a little complicated.
Well, I can go first because this happens all the time, right? We are concerned about somebody because the behavior that is being displayed is giving us a signal. we need to be very comfortable understanding these signals. And usually they come in the form of unusual behavior for the individual. But that does not qualify as an opportunity for you to address the issue.
Yeah.
What you can do is always approach people and let them know that you're there for them.
Mm.
Let them know that you would like to be part of any solution that if there is a problem. But the problem is sometimes you want to rescue people. And one thing that I learned in social work school, for example, you cannot rescue people from their circumstances or their lives. What you can is witness without judging, because sometimes can backfire if you start demonstrating a willingness to go where they are not ready to go. So what you can do is witness, address the behaviors that you perceive, but be very neutral about this, because unfortunately you might be witnessing somebody who is spiraling down. The only thing you can do is to offer a hand and a resource. You cannot go into why that's happening because it's not your business.
Yeah. Yeah, and seek professional help, of course,
Mm.
if you can provide that to that one person. Um, I want to bring another conversation here about creating a safe space for senior leaders to promote a dialogue in the workplace, like you said before, Wagner, to promote real human connections, to build trust. How do you provide that safe space to senior leaders when generally it rather looks like a weakness if they come forward as humans rather than them being, well, human? So how do you create that safe space for them? Anybody wants to say something about this one, a comment or question?
I can do this one real quick. I,
Mary, yeah.
I think you have to be really intentional about how you build that space. I know here at Haggerty, we've done a couple of things for our senior leaders around creating this space to talk about belonging and leading inclusive teams. And these were conversations that I think for any leader, and it's just not unique to us, it's difficult to raise your hand and say, gosh, I need some pointers. I need some help here. And it's being okay with having the conversation and then really diving into those different topics. You know, our leaders are so busy, they really don't have a lot of time. And so when we have these, we call it inclusive conversations, but it really is a bucket to cover everything that we know that leaders are facing. I come into those conversations with very specific things that I know that they're dealing with that maybe someone might not necessarily raise their hand and say directly, but we know it's top of mind. And so we started to do that. It's still fairly new, it's almost a year old, but it is starting to grow a little bit of momentum
Yeah.
because now they know like this is something that we can talk about. They're not the only ones struggling with whatever topic we're looking at, but it is being really thoughtful about it and then following up. For those who can't attend, we follow up and we have resources, things for them to, whether it's a LinkedIn course or an article, a podcast, following up to continue the discussion so that it's not one and done and that we're constantly evolving in this space.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah, I
Tammy,
like
go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to add more to what Maria said. Beyond what Maria said, um, another thing that we are doing in my own company with regards to creating that space for leaders is twofold. One is that we have like a simple Excel whereby on a weekly basis, the leadership team has to report in terms of what happened during the week. And part of what we've done there is one, you're supposed to highlight one OKR that has gone up that week. You're supposed to highlight um, without calling it vulnerability. So that's another thing we've done is whilst we've discussed vulnerability, but also the caption, I think somebody had mentioned what you title it as sometimes also matters while you're trying to integrate that into the system. We just called it, what are you struggling with and how can we help? That's what
Yeah.
that column is called. So you type in there what that issue is. So what other leadership team members do is go on that particular cell and comment and give you ideas or guidelines or directives as how to do it. And people have really found this very, very helpful. Like they come in like, wow, that's great, that's awesome, very appreciative. So it's really been a very good space. Another thing we've done is in one-on-ones in the leadership for the leadership team, we do one-on-ones with your team. We have a very standard one-on-one meeting template whereby one day is supposed to be.
Oh no, the internet. Tammy, she left us with something like, are you still there, Tammy? I don't know. I don't think you are. Got frozen in there. Well, let's. I'm gonna move on to the next question, and hopefully, we can get Tammy back to the chat. I don't know what happened. We're getting closer, actually, to the end of the conversation, and I want to make sure that, without being prescriptive with HR, I want to see if you can share with everybody some sort of not a roadmap, but maybe a list of things that they can do to operationalize wellness and well-being in the workplace, to make them happen, to have these conversations. So my question to all of you is, yeah, she's out now. I don't know what happened. My question to all of you is, if there are one, up to three things that you would like HR to start doing right now in order to create that conversation on wellness and well-being, to operationalize them at work. 2 3 things that they can do. They can be as complex or as simple as you think they can be. What would they be? Tammy, welcome back. We moved on to the last question of the panel. I'll get back to you in a second. So 2 or 3 things that HR can start doing right now to move this conversation forward. I know I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think about that. For everybody who is connected on the online now, watching this panel, thank you so much for being here. There's a lot of great stuff in the comment section. I apologize that we won't be able to bring all of those questions or comments to the panel, just for the for the sake of time. Keep them coming. Because, as you can see, there's been a lot of good interaction between or among you participating in this conversation. So it's exciting to see so much energy around this topic. So thank you so much. We have 3 more panels coming up today. The one that is coming up after this is connecting the dots between corporate culture, wellness, well-being, and mental health. The one after that is one of my favorite topics, which is about resilience, building resilience, helping people navigate the challenges of this chaotic or crazy world, if we may say so. And the last panel of the day will be architecting corporate culture for wellness, well-being, and mental health. And by the way, one of the reasons why we are doing this summit this week is because next week we are kicking off Mental Health Awareness Month, which I hope that we change that to Mental Health Action Month and not just Awareness Month. I think we are pretty much aware right now of all the things that are happening in the workplace. And I wanted all of you to walk away from this week with some very tangible insights and ideas that you can take action on starting next week, and hopefully from there on. So going back to the panel, in the last 2-3 minutes that we have for this last question, 2 or 3 things that HR can do to operationalize wellness, well-being in the workplace. Mary, we go with you.
Sure. I think one of the things is to implement a well-being framework and strategy, just like you would do with a new product rollout, just like you might have done for diversity and inclusion. Embed that into the organization and ensure that you are reimagining your employee benefits and really infusing caregiver pieces to that. Look at rewards and recognition. It's time to overhaul that as well as we think about well-being. I think you need to look at the data. The data tells the story, and we need to build a better business case around how we tell that case to the business. And the other piece is keep continuing to ask your employees what they need. What does well-being look like? What does creating a safe space look like? We've got to keep asking them, but do something with that data once you hear back from them.
Absolutely love the framework, and absolutely love the idea of creating the business case to move this conversation forward. Thank you for that, Mary. Who wants to go next? All right, we're gonna move. Wagner, we're gonna move with you. We're gonna go clockwise from here.
So the 3 things that come to mind to me is, first, listening. I think when we had the BLM, when we had the Black Lives Matter, and we started listening to our employees, was so powerful. We need to continue that practice, listening. Then co-creating. Any program should be a co-creation with your employees. Always an inclusive design first. And then last but not least, bring your well-being as part of your team meetings is a business meeting topic because that creates the idea that is part of life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I like the simplicity of it all. Tammy, we go with you. I don't know if you are. Yeah, you're there. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
know if.
yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, connection working well.
Yeah, I'm going to go in Wagner's route as well. Very simple. You mentioned something about a wellness month. So just having a month set out every year or going by the calendar year that there's a wellness month and then creating activities and topics, people acting out what it means to be well, what it means to not be well, and how it impacts work, and then sharing this across board and having discussions around it is one simple thing to do to carry that conversation forward. Another thing is in one-on-one meetings is that out of your four one-on-one meetings you have in a month is at least set aside one, like Maria said, not just to not stop talking. I mean, there's this book, The Advantage, and it talks about the fact that communicate, 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 don't stop communicating. So, I mean, those one-on-one meetings, why three of them you might make and try to make one of them as all about inclusiveness and well-being oriented as much as possible so that we're not just chasing after tasks. And then pretty much simple activities that would involve people having their families over as a sort of engagement for me, I find works a lot because it helps to delve some of the tension. They also feel at home. So whether it's a family month or a family picnic month, or you have vouchers you're giving out away that would excite both the employees and your families, very simple things. I think that helps the employee to feel like, I'm not just coming to work, I'm coming home because they can connect home and work.
Tammy, thank you so much for sharing that. And last but not least, Mindy.
I was just thinking of what Wagner was saying as a way to kind of take that a step further to just action that within the organization is a concept that I've loved and used is team norms as a way for managers at all levels to be able to work with their teams, to be able to have them speak into what are our team norms, what is important for us, and be able to work the best together and to hold each other accountable. And then to set a quarterly meeting or even bi-monthly to check in on how are those team norms working or are they not working, or thumbs up, thumbs down, how do we do on the team norms, and are those team norms still serving us, and maybe we actually need to change them to make sure they're agile to evolve with the needs and changes of the team, especially when we introduce new team members, making sure that we go back and review those team norms so that new person has opportunity and the space to be able to have a voice into that.
Love that. This was a fantastic kickoff to our Wellness and Wellbeing Summit. Thank you so much for sharing all of these awesome insights to, not only keep the conversation moving, but providing very actionable insights for HR and for everybody else who's listening to this conversation to act on this. So Mindy, Mary, Wagner, Tammy, thank you so much for being part of this first conversation. Everybody who is here listening, stay tuned. In 2 minutes from now, we're going to be kicking off the second panel of the day, which will be connecting the dots between corporate culture, wellness, well-being, and mental health. Stay tuned. We're going to be coming back in 2 minutes. So thank you so much to this amazing panel. I will see you soon. Thank you.